The Giant Bride and the Rich Cowboy Part 1, The Wedding Day Disaster. Magnolia stood at the altar in her custom-made wedding dress, towering over everyone in the church at 7 feet and 3 inches tall. Her hands trembled as she watched her fiancé Derek sprint down the aisle toward the exit, his face pale with terror. The congregation gasped in unison as he threw open the heavy oak doors and disappeared into the Texas afternoon sun. She heard his truck engine roar to life in the parking lot, tires squealing as he fled from their wedding. The minister's mouth hung open in shock. Magnolia's mother sobbed loudly in the front pew. Her bridesmaids whispered frantically among themselves, their colorful dresses rustling with nervous energy. Magnolia felt every eye in the room boring into her, judging her, pitying her. This was the third engagement she'd lost. The third man who couldn't handle being with a woman who looked down at him instead of up. She gathered her voluminous white skirts in her large hands and walked down the aisle with as much dignity as she could muster. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like hammers striking nails into her pride. Outside, the June heat hit her like a physical blow. She stood on the church steps, blinking back tears that threatened to ruin her makeup. The parking lot was nearly empty now except for a few cars belonging to elderly relatives who moved too slowly to flee the scene of her humiliation. A sleek black pickup truck pulled up to the curb. The door opened and out stepped a man who couldn't have been more than 5 feet 8 inches tall. He wore an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, paired with genuine alligator boots and a black Stetson hat. His face was weathered but handsome, with sharp blue eyes that assessed her without judgment. A silver belt buckle the size of a dinner plate gleamed in the sunlight. "Name's Colton Hayes," he said, extending his hand upward. "I was driving by when I saw all the commotion. Saw your groom running out of here like his pants were on fire." Magnolia stared at his outstretched hand but didn't take it. "Great. Another witness to my disaster. Are you here to offer sympathy or just gawk at the giant freak?" Colton didn't flinch at her bitter tone. Instead, he lowered his hand and tilted his head to look up at her face. "Actually, I was going to offer you a job." She laughed, but it came out harsh and broken. "A job? Today? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I own Hayes Ranch, about 50 miles north of here. Biggest cattle operation in 3 counties. I need someone strong to help with my breeding program. The pay is $20,000 a month, plus room and board in the main house." Magnolia's breath caught. $20,000 a month was more than she made in 6 months at her current warehouse job. "Why would you offer that to a complete stranger?" Colton smiled, revealing straight white teeth. "Because I saw you walk out of that church with your head held high even though your world just collapsed. That takes strength of character. And frankly, I need someone who won't break when the work gets hard. You look like you could toss a hay bale over a barn." She wanted to be offended, but his tone held only admiration. For the first time in hours, she felt something other than shame. "What exactly would I be doing?" "Herding cattle, managing equipment, helping with difficult births during calving season. Heavy lifting. Long hours. But honest work." He pulled a business card from his pocket and held it up to her. "Think about it. Come by tomorrow if you're interested. Right now, you probably want to get out of that dress and away from all these people." Magnolia took the card, her fingers dwarfing his hand. She read the embossed lettering, Hayes Ranch, Colton Hayes, owner and operator. An address and phone number were printed below in elegant script. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. Colton met her eyes without hesitation. "Because I know what it's like to be judged for something you can't control. And because I think you deserve better than what happened in there today." He tipped his hat, climbed back into his truck, and drove away before she could respond. Magnolia stood holding the card, feeling the first spark of hope she'd felt in years. Magnolia drove through the gates of Hayes Ranch the next morning, her beat-up sedan looking pathetic next to the miles of pristine white fencing. The property stretched as far as she could see, with rolling green pastures dotted with hundreds of cattle. The main house was a sprawling 2-story structure that looked like something from a magazine, all stone and timber with a wraparound porch. Colton was waiting on the porch steps, dressed in work clothes now, worn jeans, a plaid shirt, and scuffed boots. He looked more comfortable than he had in the suit, more at home in this environment. He waved as she parked and walked over to meet her. "Glad you came," he said. "Wasn't sure if you would." $20,000 a month is hard to turn down," Magnolia replied, climbing out of her car. She dressed practically in jeans and a t-shirt, her long hair pulled back in a ponytail. "But I need to know this is legitimate before I quit my current job." Colton nodded. "Fair enough. Let me show you around and you can decide." He led her through the property, explaining the operation as they walked. He owned 3,000 acres and ran over 2,000 head of cattle. He had a staff of 15 ranch hands who handled most of the daily operations, but he needed someone to manage the more challenging tasks. His prize breeding bull, Goliath, required special handling because of his size and temperament. His words painted a picture of serious, demanding work. They reached a massive barn where Goliath was kept. The bull was enormous, easily weighing over 2,000 pounds, with curved horns and eyes that gleamed with intelligence and aggression. He snorted when he saw them, pawing at the ground with one massive hoof. His rejected 4 handlers in the past year, Colton explained. Either they're too scared of him or too rough. He needs someone who can be firm but respectful. Someone he can't intimidate. Magnolia studied the animal. She'd grown up on a small farm and understood livestock. What happened to your last handler? Quit after Goliath charged him. Guy was 6'2" and thought his size made him invincible. Goliath proved him wrong. Colton leaned against the fence. I think the bull responds to confidence, not aggression. You strike me as confident. Or desperate, Magnolia muttered. Confidence and desperation look the same sometimes, Colton said with a slight smile. The question is whether you're willing to try. Magnolia made her decision. She climbed over the fence into Goliath's pen before Colton could stop her. The bull immediately focused on her, head lowering in a threatening posture. She stood her ground, meeting his gaze without backing down. They stayed locked in that silent battle of wills for nearly a minute. Then Goliath snorted, tossed his head, and turned away, resuming his feeding. Colton's eyebrows rose. I'll be damned. That took guts. It took understanding, Magnolia corrected, climbing back over the fence. He wasn't really threatening me. He was testing me. Animals do that. People do that. The key is knowing when to stand firm and when to back down. You're hired, Colton said immediately. When can you start? I need 2 weeks to give notice at my current job and pack my things. Fair enough. I'll have your room prepared. He started walking back toward the house, then paused. I should tell you something. The ranch hands might give you trouble at first. They're good men but set in their ways. Having a woman in a senior position might ruffle some feathers. Magnolia laughed genuinely for the first time since the wedding disaster. Colton, I've been too tall, too strong, too different my entire life. I learned to handle trouble before I learned to read. A few cowboys with attitude problems don't scare me. Good, Colton said. Because this job will test you in ways you haven't imagined yet. Those words would prove prophetic. 2 weeks later, Magnolia moved into the ranch house, a beautiful room on the second floor with windows overlooking the pastures. Her first morning, she met the ranch hands at dawn. They sized her up with obvious skepticism, making crude jokes when they thought she couldn't hear. She ignored them and focused on the work. The first test came 3 days in. One of the pregnant cows went into difficult labor in the middle of the night. The on-call veterinarian was 2 hours away dealing with an emergency at another ranch. Colton woke Magnolia and brought her to the barn where the cow was struggling. The calf was breech, and the mother was weakening fast. We need to turn the calf manually, Colton explained. It's going to take strength and precision. I've done it before but my shoulder's been giving me trouble. Can you handle it? Magnolia rolled up her sleeves. Tell me what to do. Magnolia thrust her arm deep into the birth canal, feeling the slick warmth and the desperate contractions of the struggling cow. Sweat dripped down her face despite the cool night air. The calf's legs were positioned wrong, bent backward when they should be forward. Every second counted. The mother cow's breathing was labored, her eyes rolling with pain and exhaustion. Easy now, Colton coached from beside her. Feel for the hocks. You need to push the calf back slightly, then bring the legs forward one at a time. Her fingers found the joints he described. The space was cramped and her arm was already aching, but she worked carefully. She pushed against the calf's body, feeling it shift slightly. The mother bellowed in distress. Magnolia gritted her teeth and focused, blocking out everything except the task. She hooked her fingers around one tiny leg and guided it forward, then repeated the process with the second leg. Got them, she gasped. Both legs are positioned right. Now pull during the next contraction, Colton instructed. Steady pressure, not jerky. Work with the mother, not against her. Magnolia waited for the next contraction, then pulled firmly on the calf's legs. Nothing happened. She adjusted her grip and pulled harder, using her shoulders and back. Slowly, impossibly slowly, the calf began to emerge. The mother cow strained with everything she had left. Magnolia pulled again, her muscles screaming in protest. Suddenly the calf slipped free in a rush of fluid, landing in the straw. Colton immediately grabbed towels and began rubbing the newborn vigorously, clearing its airways. The calf coughed, wheezed, then took its first breath. Within minutes it was trying to stand on wobbly legs. The mother cow, exhausted but relieved, began licking her baby clean. Magnolia sat back in the straw, her arm covered in blood and birth fluids, her shirt soaked with sweat. She was breathing hard, her heart pounding from the exertion and adrenaline. Colton handed her a towel with a grin. "That was textbook perfect," he said. "I've seen veterinarians with 20 years' experience struggle with breech births. You did it on your first try." "Beginner's luck," Magnolia said, wiping her face. "No. That was skill and nerve." Colton stood and offered her his hand. "Come on. Let's get you cleaned up. Dawn's in a few hours and we've got a full day ahead." Word of the successful delivery spread through the ranch hands by breakfast. Magnolia noticed the change immediately. The crude jokes stopped. The skeptical looks were replaced with nods of acknowledgement. When she walked into the barn that morning, one of the older hands, a weathered man named Pete, actually touched the brim of his hat in respect. "Heard about last night," Pete said. "That was good work." "Just doing my job," Magnolia replied. "Still, not everyone could have done it." Pete gestured to the other men. "We were wrong about you. Would be proud to work alongside you." Over the following weeks, Magnolia threw herself into ranch life. She worked longer hours than anyone else, arriving before dawn and staying past sunset. She helped repair fences in the burning sun, herded cattle through muddy fields, operated heavy machinery, and handled Goliath with a confidence that amazed everyone. The massive bull had become almost docile around her, following her commands like a puppy. Colton watched her progress with obvious satisfaction. He often worked beside her, and she noticed he never condescended or micromanaged. He treated her as an equal partner in the operation. They fell into an easy rhythm, anticipating each other's needs and communicating with minimal words. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of moving a large herd to new pastures, they sat on the porch of the main house drinking cold beer and watching the sunset. Magnolia's muscles ached pleasantly from honest work. She felt more content than she had in years. "You've exceeded every expectation," Colton said quietly. "This ranch runs smoother with you here than it has in 5 years." "It's good work," Magnolia replied. "Honest. No pretending to be something I'm not." Colton was silent for a moment, then said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Depends on the question." "Why do you think those men left you? The fiancés?" Magnolia stiffened. She'd been avoiding thinking about Derek and the others. "Because I'm too tall. Because they felt emasculated. Because society expects women to be smaller, delicate, dependent. I'm none of those things." "That's what they told themselves," Colton said. "But I don't think that's the real reason." "Oh? And what do you think the real reason is?" He turned to look at her directly. "I think they were intimidated by your strength. Not your physical strength, though that's impressive. Your emotional strength. Your independence. They wanted someone they could protect and provide for because that made them feel important. You don't need protection or providing. You're complete on your own. That's terrifying to small-minded men." Magnolia felt something crack open inside her chest. Nobody had ever articulated it that way before. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No. It's supposed to help you understand that being who you are isn't a flaw. It's a strength. You just need to find someone secure enough to appreciate it instead of fear it." Their eyes met and held. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared understanding. Magnolia felt her pulse quicken. Colton was several inches shorter than her, but in that moment, his presence felt immense. The moment was broken by Pete calling from the barn. One of the horses had developed a limp and needed attention. Magnolia stood reluctantly, the spell broken but not forgotten. "Tomorrow's another early day," she said. "They all are," Colton replied with a slight smile. "That's ranch life." As Magnolia walked toward the barn, she could feel his eyes on her back. Something was changing between them, something neither had acknowledged yet but both felt growing stronger each day. The weather forecast called for severe thunderstorms, but nobody expected what hit Hayes Ranch that night. Magnolia was awakened by thunder so loud it shook the house. Rain hammered against the windows like bullets. She threw on her clothes and boots, already knowing she'd be needed. Storms meant frightened animals, potential damage, and emergencies. She met Colton on the stairs. He was already dressed, carrying flashlights and rain gear. His face was grim. "The far pasture," he said without preamble. "Where we keep the pregnant heifers. The creek runs through there and it floods fast in storms like this. We need to move them to higher ground before they get trapped." They ran through the rain to his truck, visibility nearly zero. The windshield wipers couldn't keep up with the deluge. Lightning illuminated the landscape in violent flashes, revealing a world transformed into chaos. Tree branches whipped in the wind. Water streamed across the roads and rivers. When they reached the far pasture, Magnolia's heart sank. The creek had already overflowed its banks. 20 frightened heifers, all heavy with unborn calves, were clustered on a small rise that was rapidly becoming an island. The water was rising by the minute. Several ranch hands had already arrived, but they looked uncertain, hesitating at the edge of the flood. "We can't wait for it to recede," Colton shouted over the storm. "That rise will be underwater in less than an hour. We have to get them out now." "The current's too strong," Pete yelled back. "If we go in there, we'll get swept away." Colton looked at Magnolia. In his eyes, she saw not a question but a statement of faith. He knew what she could do. She nodded once. "We'll use ropes," Magnolia called out. "Tie them to the truck. I'll go in and guide the heifers. You pull from shore." "That's suicide," one of the hands protested. "You'll drown or get crushed." "No, I won't," Magnolia said with absolute certainty. "I'm strong enough to handle this. But we need to move now." They secured ropes around her waist, triple-checking every knot. Colton grabbed her arm before she entered the water, his grip tight. "You don't have to do this," he said. "We can find another way." "There is no other way and you know it," Magnolia replied. "Trust me." She waded into the flood. The current immediately tried to knock her off her feet, but she planted her legs wide and pushed forward. The water reached her thighs, then her waist. Debris struck her legs but she ignored the impacts. Lightning revealed the terrified eyes of the heifers watching her approach. She reached the rise and began working methodically, speaking calmly to the animals despite the chaos. She fashioned makeshift leads from the ropes and secured them around the strongest heifers first. Then she began guiding them back toward shore, using her body as a shield against the current. The men on shore pulled when she signaled, helping draw the animals through the flood. One by one, she brought them to safety. It took over an hour of exhausting, dangerous work. Her body was battered and bruised from debris. Her muscles screamed from fighting the relentless current. But she didn't stop until every single heifer was safely on high ground. The last animal clear, Magnolia tried to wade back. But her strength finally failed her. Her foot slipped on hidden rocks and the current swept her legs out from under her. She went under, the ropes around her waist the only thing preventing her from being carried downstream. She surfaced gasping, unable to find purchase on the slick creek bottom. Colton didn't hesitate. He dove into the flood fully clothed and fought his way to her. His arms wrapped around her from behind, holding her head above water while the ranch hands pulled them both to shore. They landed in the mud together, coughing and gasping. "You crazy woman," Colton shouted, but there was no anger in his voice. Only relief and something else. Something intense. "You could have died." "But I didn't," Magnolia shot back. "And neither did those heifers or their calves." The ranch hands were cheering, slapping each other on the backs. Pete was grinning like a fool. But Magnolia only saw Colton. They were lying in the mud, rain pouring down, and he was looking at her like she'd hung the moon. "You're incredible," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the storm. "The most incredible person I've ever met." "Colton," she started, but he cut her off. "No, let me say this. I hired you because I saw your strength. But I kept you here because of everything else. Your courage. Your kindness. The way you treat every animal and person with respect. The way you never complain or make excuses. Magnolia, you're not just an employee. You haven't been for weeks." Her breath caught. "Then what am I?" "Everything," he said simply. "You're everything." 3 months had passed since the storm. Summer had given way to early fall, painting the ranch in golds and russets. The work continued its relentless pace, but Magnolia had never been happier. She and Colton had grown closer, though both had been hesitant to fully acknowledge what was happening between them. They worked together, ate meals together, sat on the porch in comfortable silence together. The tension built daily, unspoken but unmistakable. The ranch hands noticed, of course. Pete had actually winked at Magnolia one morning when Colton's hand had lingered on her shoulder a moment too long. But neither she nor Colton had crossed the line from partnership to something more. Magnolia told herself it was professional boundaries. Deep down, she knew it was fear. Fear that admitting feelings would somehow ruin the perfect thing they'd built. On a crisp October morning, Colton found her in Goliath's pen. The massive bull was lying peacefully while Magnolia examined a cut on his flank, speaking softly to keep him calm. Colton leaned against the fence, watching her work with obvious admiration. "He's completely tame with you," Colton observed. "With anyone else, he'd be trying to gore them by now." "He just needs to be understood," Magnolia said, applying ointment to the wound. "We're not so different, him and me. Big, intimidating on the outside. But we just want to be treated with basic respect." "You deserve more than basic respect," Colton said. "You deserve everything." Magnolia looked up at him. Something in his tone made her heart race. "Colton. I need to tell you something," he interrupted. "I've been putting this off because I was scared. Scared of ruining what we have. Scared you'd leave. Scared of 100 things that don't matter anymore." He climbed into the pen, approaching her slowly. Even Goliath seemed to sense the moment's importance, remaining still and quiet. Colton reached up and took her hand. His hand was rough from work, warm and solid in hers. "I'm in love with you, Magnolia. Completely, utterly in love with you. I have been for months. Maybe from that first day when I saw you walk out of that church with your head held high. You're the strongest, bravest, most beautiful person I've ever known. And before you say anything about your height or our differences, let me be clear. Those things don't matter to me. They never have." Magnolia's throat tightened with emotion. "Colton, I'm 7 feet tall. You're 5'8". People will stare. They'll make jokes. They'll say terrible things. Let them," he said fiercely. "Let them stare and joke and say whatever they want. I don't care about their opinions. I only care about yours. The question is whether you can love a man who has to look up to meet your eyes." "That's never been the question," Magnolia whispered. "The question is whether you truly understand what you're asking for. Every man I've loved has eventually realized they couldn't handle it. The looks from strangers. The assumptions. The emasculation they felt even when I never intended it." Colton pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face. "Those men were fools. They loved the idea of you but couldn't handle the reality. I'm not them. I don't need to be taller than you to be your equal. I don't need to prove my masculinity by making you smaller. Your strength doesn't threaten mine. It complements it." "You really mean that," she said, seeing the absolute conviction in his eyes. "With everything I am," he confirmed. "Magnolia, I want to build a life with you. A real partnership in every sense. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to work beside you every day. I want to grow old watching sunsets from that porch. I want—" He stopped, reaching into his pocket. When his hand emerged, it held a small velvet box. Magnolia's breath stopped entirely. "I want you to marry me," Colton said, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring set in platinum. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few months. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're my partner, my equal, my everything. Will you marry me?" Magnolia stared at the ring, then at his face. 1,000 fears rose in her mind. Memories of Derek running from their wedding. Memories of the others before him who'd promised forever then fled when reality set in. But when she looked at Colton, she didn't see those men. She saw someone who'd never once made her feel too big, too strong, too much. She saw someone who celebrated everything she was instead of trying to diminish it. "Yes," she said, the word coming out choked with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Colton let out a whoop of joy and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he did something unexpected. He reached up, grabbed her face with both hands, and pulled her down into a kiss. She had to bend significantly, and he had to stretch up on his toes, but their lips met perfectly. The kiss was electric, full of months of restrained passion finally released. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and grinning like idiots. Goliath snorted his approval, making them both laugh. "There's one more thing," Colton said, his expression turning mischievous. "Something I've been wanting to try. Something that might seem unconventional, but I think you'll understand the symbolism." "What?" Magnolia asked warily. He gestured to his face, then pointed downward. "I want you to literally look down on me. I want to experience your perspective. I want to understand what it feels like to be you in a world that expects you to make yourself smaller. Magnolia understood immediately what he was asking. You want me to put my mouth where? She asked with shocked laughter. The question was crude, but the intent behind it was profound. Exactly where you think, Colton said with a grin. I want to experience what it's like when the power dynamic is completely flipped. When you're in total control. When my perspective is literally from below looking up. Because that's the reality of loving you, and I want to embrace every aspect of it without shame or hesitation. Magnolia grabbed him then, pulling him close despite their height difference. You're either the craziest man I've ever met or the smartest. Maybe both, he admitted. But I'm yours. Completely and forever yours. Every ridiculous, unconventional, wonderful inch of this is real. They stood in Goliath's pen, holding each other while the morning sun rose higher. Around them, the ranch awakened to a new day. Pete rang the bell for breakfast, and the other hands began emerging from the bunkhouse. When they saw Magnolia and Colton embracing, saw the ring glinting on her finger, they erupted in cheers and congratulations. Later, at breakfast, Colton stood and announced their engagement officially. The room exploded with applause and good-natured ribbing. Pete started a betting pool on the wedding date. The cook brought out a special cake she'd apparently been hiding for weeks, convinced this moment would come. Magnolia sat at the head of the table, Colton beside her, his hand firmly clasped in hers. She looked around at the faces of the men who'd become like family. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the humiliation of that abandoned wedding to this moment of complete joy. She thought about all the years she'd spent trying to make herself smaller, quieter, less intimidating. Here, in this place, with these people, and especially with this man beside her, she could finally be exactly who she was. All 7 feet 3 inches of strength, capability, and fierce independence. And she was loved not despite those things, but because of them. Colton leaned over and whispered in her ear, "What are you thinking about?" "That I'm home," Magnolia whispered back. "Finally, truly home." He kissed her hand. "Good. Because this ranch, this life, this family we're building, it's all yours too. Everything I have is yours." "Everything I am is yours," she replied. Around them, the ranch hands continued their celebration. Plans were already being made for the wedding, for the party, for the future. But Magnolia and Colton existed in their own bubble of perfect happiness, two people who'd found exactly what they needed in each other. Outside, the morning sun illuminated the endless Texas landscape. Cattle grazed peacefully in the pastures. Horses ran free in the corrals. The ranch that had given Magnolia a second chance at life would now be the setting for her new beginning. She'd come here broken and lost. She was leaving that old version of herself behind forever. In her place stood a woman who knew her worth. A woman who'd found a partner who celebrated her strength instead of fearing it. A woman who would never again apologize for being exactly who she was meant to be. And when people stared at them in town, when they whispered about the tall woman and the shorter man, Magnolia would smile and hold Colton's hand tighter. Because their love wasn't about meeting society's expectations. It was about two people recognizing the truth in each other and choosing it every single day. That was the real fairy tale. Not the princess being rescued by someone bigger and stronger. But two equals finding each other and building something beautiful together, regardless of what anyone else thought. As the celebration continued around them, Magnolia caught Colton's eye and mouthed 3 words, "I love you." He mouthed them back without hesitation. It was the beginning of everything.